There is an old saying that you hear all the time. With great power comes great responsibility, and it means exactly that. But throughout history, a lot of people came into power, but they were not responsible. This is when we get to a family that ran Russia for more than 300 years. Romanov family, also known as the Tsars. After 1598, when Fyodor I died, the Rurik dynasty collapses and Russia turns into an anarchy. It was an anarchy for about 15 years, just like Libya after Gaddafi. After all this commotion, in the year 1613, Michael Romanov takes control of Russia and he announced himself Emperor of Russia, and they also called him the Tsar. From 1645 to 1682, son after son, people take over the throne of Russia. But when we get to 1682, there is a problem, because there's two people that want to be in charge. After Tsar Fyodor III dies, two of his brothers, Ivan V and Peter I, want to be Tsar of Russia. They ask the parliament to vote, and they vote for Peter to be the Tsar. When Peter was chosen, Ivan said it can't be like this. We should be a partner. And Peter accepts, and until 1696, they were both the Tsar of Russia. But at that year, he said it can't be like this, and he announced himself the only Tsar of Russia. You could say he took the parliament out of the picture, because he chose who the next king or queen is gonna be. After that, he chooses his wife to be the next Tsar of Russia, Catherine I. After Peter the Great dies and Catherine takes over, she chooses her grandson Peter II to be the next Tsar of Russia. Generation after generation, the Tsars chose their family to be the Emperor of Russia. It wasn't only their son anymore, it was whoever they want. Bad choices made Russia get worse and worse, and basically that led to the collapse of Russian Empire. In the year 1894, we once again have two emperors running Russia, Alexander II and Alexander III. After these two, Alexander III's son, Nicholas II, is the new Tsar of Russia. He is considered the kill shot to the Russian Empire. When Nicholas came into power, you could say the people were tired of the government, and the country was not stable. From the other hand, you could say Nicholas was not leader material, and he couldn't run a country like this. When we get to 1904, Nicholas makes a huge mistake, and he tries to take over Japan and add it to the Russian Empire. The Russian army attacks Japan, and they have a war for about a year. After the war, it was an embarrassment for Russia because they were terribly defeated. After this war, the protests start in Russia, but the Russian army attacks the people back, and more than 100 people were shot and killed, also known as Bloody Sunday. The killing stopped the protests, but the people didn't forget. We get to 1914, when World War I begins. Nicholas was already struggling to run an empire. Now he has a giant war ahead of him. He had an army that was not prepared and not equipped, and not only did they not want to fight for their country, they wanted to commit suicide. If you've seen our video about Russian roulette and where it came from, you'll know that it got popular after World War I in Russia. Not only did Nicholas II send an unprepared army to war, he couldn't even feed his own people at that time. The problems with his own military and the things that are happening at home gave him the nickname Bloody Nicholas. Nicholas II was very indecisive, and whoever was next to him was basically giving him ideas, and he would go along with their idea instead of making up his own mind. Another thing people didn't like about Nicholas was that he had a German wife. Alexandra was a German woman, and people were mad at him that you're an emperor of Russia and you have a German wife. These two had 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son, and his one son that was still a child was the next emperor of Russia. Alexei, Nicholas's son, had a disease as well, and his mother Alexandra was trying her hardest to treat him. Do you guys know this guy? His name is in history, Gregory Rasputin. Nicholas's wife Alexandra had terrible anxiety. He saw the problems the people had and how Nicholas was struggling to handle it, and that's why she becomes friends with the holy man. Rasputin was a self-claimed holy man, and he got very close to the Romanov family through Alexandra. You could say Rasputin was taking advantage of the Romanov family because they really wanted to cure Alexei, their son. Rasputin suggests to Nicholas that you have to stay in power in order for Alexei to stay alive, and that's why you have to try your hardest. Nicholas II was very irresponsible, and Rasputin noticed that. And after a while, you could say Rasputin was running Russia instead of Nicholas II. Gregory Rasputin's story deserves its own video, but to go along with the story, you have to know that he was shot and killed in St. Petersburg in the year 1916. We get to the year 1917, when Nicholas is with his army in the city of Mogilev, and his wife Alexandra is running the country. Around these years, more than 100,000 people go in the streets of St. Petersburg and protest that they're hungry. Alexandra sends a message to her husband that people are in the streets and they're hungry. Since Nicholas was in the middle of World War I in Mogilev, he's forced to send his army back to St. Petersburg. Most of these protesters were women because the men were at war. Nicholas's troops were already tired of him, and they were getting orders to basically oppress their own people. Instead of controlling the protests, they joined the protests. This makes the situation in St. Petersburg way worse. This is when the Russian parliament, or the Duma, suggests to Nicholas to get out with your family because things could get out of control. Alexandra tells the parliament that her son is sick and they're not going anywhere. Nicholas is in Mogilev and he's not sure what to do, and he eventually decides to get back to his wife and kids. On March 15, 1917, the Duma decide to fire the Romanov family from running Russia. After 300 years of the Tsars, they basically ended it right there and there. This is in a way where Nicholas II is not even in St. Petersburg yet. He was in the city of Pskov, and he got news that you're not the king anymore. He says, okay, I'll step down, but make Michael, my brother, the king. The Duma says it's too late for that, because not only did the protesters take over the cities, but the Bolsheviks have taken power. This is when Nicholas II writes a letter to George V, King of England. In the letter, he asks to be a refugee. This is when the Bolsheviks tell the people, we have to stop Nicholas and not let him leave to England. When the letter got to George V, he declined the offer and said, we're in the middle of a war and don't want to go head to head with the Bolsheviks. When on March 1917, Nicholas II returns to St. Petersburg, his family were arrested in the palace, and that's when they arrest Nicholas II as well and send him in the same room. The Bolsheviks don't have absolute power yet, and this is all being done by the Duma. In 1970, the Duma decides to send Nicholas II's family to Siberia to keep them safe. 2 months passes and we get to October, and the name seems very familiar, October Revolution, and that's when it's successful. Just like the Bolsheviks, like Lenin or Stalin, had power over Russia. In the beginning, Lenin was the leader of the Communist Party of Russia, a country named the Soviet Union. He would tell the people that we have to take Nicholas to court. The Communist Party sent men to Tobolsk, Siberia, to arrest Nicholas II and his family and bring him to Moscow, the new capital city of the USSR. The Communists moved the capital city from St. Petersburg to Moscow, and St. Petersburg, that had the name Peter the Great in it, was changed to Leningrad. And the reason was Peter the Great was under the Romanov family. But before we move on, I have to tell you that after the Soviet Union collapsed, the name was changed back to St. Petersburg from Leningrad. The men that went to Tobolsk arrest the entire family and meet the Bolsheviks in the Ural Mountains to turn them in. On July 17, 1918, the White Army decided to come and save the Romanov family. The Bolsheviks were keeping the family in Yekaterinburg, a city that's about 2,000 kilometers away from Moscow. You could say the Bolsheviks wanted to keep this family away from Europe so they don't escape. When the communists realized the White Army is headed their way to save the family, they didn't waste any time. In the middle of the night, they woke up the family and told them to come into this room. The commander that was watching over the Romanov family had a name of Yakov Yarovsky. His men come inside the room with guns, and Yarovsky pulls out a piece of paper and starts reading it. The letter he was reading was to execute the entire family, small to big. You could say communist style. Alongside the family, they have a family doctor that takes care of Alexei, and they also have dogs. After Yarovsky reads the letter, he orders his men to shoot without covering anybody's head or tying them up. And the family panics and starts running everywhere. And you could say the soldiers actually shot one another as well. They didn't show mercy to the doctor, they killed him as well. And don't forget about the dogs as well. His men wouldn't shoot towards the kids, but since Yarovsky was a true Bolshevik, he showed no mercy and killed the children. This is written in history that Yarovsky and his men were all drunk. There was dead bodies on the ground, but some of them were still suffering and weren't dead yet, and that's Nicholas included. Yarovsky orders his men to use a bayonet to finish them off. But another thing that was written in history was that Yarovsky had different plans. He had no orders to kill them yet, but since he heard that the White Army is headed his way, he didn't waste any time. So they got drunk and asked the family to get executed. Yarovsky was not finished yet. He asked his men to pile up the bodies and burn them down with sulfuric acid and gasoline. After Lenin realized what happened to them, he couldn't tell the people what happened. He just told the people that we executed Nicholas II and Alexandra, his wife. He didn't mention the children, and that's why throughout their history, different people would come along and say, "I'm the child of Nicholas II." But you could say the Communist Party knew they were lying because they were all killed in 1918. When you continue through USSR history, they hide the truth, even between the government. So the Soviet government didn't even know what happened to Nicholas II's family. You might find this surprising, but the communist regime found out in 1979 what actually happened to that family on that day. They didn't tell anyone at that time either, and the history we're telling you right now was leaked in 1991 after the fall of the Soviet Union. Even the Russian people didn't know for 70 years what happened to the king's family. In the year 1998, they sent a group of scientists to Yekaterinburg to see what actually happened to that family on that day. They realized that they were all murdered on that day, and they tried to get rid of the body with acid and gasoline, but they were unsuccessful. With the help of DNA, they realized the entire Romanov family was killed, the family doctor, and the dog. After they found out what actually happened, they created a memorial in St. Petersburg for them.